Alternator replacement? Check these 8 things first. Replacing an alternator sounds simple. The battery light comes on, the headlights go dim, the battery keeps dying, and the alternator gets blamed almost immediately. But that is exactly where a lot of money gets wasted, because charging system problems do not always mean the alternator itself is bad. Sometimes it is, yes, but other times the real issue is a weak battery, dirty terminals, a bad ground, a slipping belt, a blown fuse, a wiring problem, a battery drain, or a smart charging issue that makes the alternator look guilty. So before you replace an expensive part, there are a few things you should check first. In this video, I will show you 8 important things to rule out before replacing an alternator. So before you buy parts and guess, let's go step by step. Check number 1. The battery itself may be weak. This is the first thing you should think about. A bad battery can create symptoms that look very similar to alternator failure. You may get slow cranking, dim lights, warning lights, weak accessories, or a car that struggles to stay running. And when that happens, many people assume the alternator is the problem. But if the battery cannot hold a charge properly, the charging system may look weak even when the alternator is still working. That is why alternator diagnosis should never skip battery condition first, because if the battery itself is bad, replacing the alternator may change nothing. Check number 2. Battery terminals may be loose or corroded. This is one of the easiest things to overlook. If the battery terminals are dirty, loose, or covered in corrosion, electrical flow can become weak or unstable. That can cause hard starting, voltage drop, flickering lights, random warning lights, or charging problems that come and go. And from the driver's seat, it can feel exactly like the alternator is failing. But if the connection between the battery and the rest of the car is poor, the alternator may not be the real issue at all. So before replacing it, check the terminals closely, because a bad connection can imitate a bad charging system very well. Check number 3. The ground cable or main charging cable may be the real problem. A charging system depends on more than just the alternator itself. It also depends on strong electrical paths. That means the ground cable, engine ground, and main charging wire all matter. If one of those cables is loose, damaged, corroded, or creating resistance, the alternator may not be able to deliver power properly. That can lead to low charging voltage, battery light issues, weak accessories, or repeated battery problems. And once again, the alternator gets blamed first. So before replacing it, make sure the power and ground paths are not the real reason charging performance looks weak. Check number 4. The serpentine belt or belt tensioner may be slipping. This is a big one. The alternator has to be driven by the engine, and on most vehicles that happens through the serpentine belt. If the belt is loose, worn, glazed, or slipping, the alternator may not spin the way it should. And if the belt tensioner is weak, the same thing can happen. That means charging output may drop, especially under load. You may notice battery light warnings, a squealing noise, dim lights, or charging problems that seem worse at idle or with accessories on. At that point, many people think the alternator is dying. But if the belt cannot drive it properly, the alternator never had a fair chance to do its job. Check number 5. A fuse or fusible link may be blown. Sometimes the alternator is producing power, but that power is not reaching the battery or the rest of the system correctly. Why? Because some vehicles use charging fuses, mega fuses, or fusible links between the alternator and the battery. If one of those fails, the alternator may seem dead even when the alternator itself is still good. That can create battery light issues, a dead battery, or charging voltage that makes no sense. This is one reason why swapping alternators blindly can be a mistake, because if the real problem is a blown fuse or link, the new alternator will still not solve it. Check number 6. The alternator connector, wiring, or regulator circuit may be faulty. Here is another common trap. Sometimes the alternator is not completely dead. It just is not being controlled properly. A damaged connector, broken wire, corroded plug, or regulator circuit issue can stop the alternator from charging normally. On some cars, the alternator is not just a simple standalone unit. It works together with the vehicle's charging control system. So if the signal wire, field circuit, or regulator control has a problem, charging may become weak, intermittent, or completely wrong. And in that case, replacing the alternator without checking the wiring can waste a lot of money, because the real failure was in the circuit, not in the alternator housing. Check number 7. A parasitic drain may be killing the battery. This is one of the biggest mistakes in charging system diagnosis. The battery keeps going dead, so the alternator gets blamed. But what if the alternator is charging fine and something else is draining the battery while the car is off? A parasitic draw from a module, light, relay, or accessory can slowly kill the battery between drives. Then the car starts weakly. The battery light may come on, the system voltage feels low, and the alternator looks guilty. But the real problem may be a battery that keeps getting drained overnight. This matters a lot when the battery seems fine right after driving, but weak again later, because that pattern can point more toward a drain than a failed alternator. Check number 8. The vehicle may have a smart charging or battery sensor issue. And finally, one more thing many people never think about. On some modern vehicles, charging is controlled by more than just the alternator itself. The system may use a battery current sensor, a smart charging strategy, or computer-controlled voltage regulation. If one of those related parts is giving bad information, the alternator may not charge the way you expect. That can create low voltage, charging warnings, battery problems, or readings that make it seem like the alternator is failing when the real issue is somewhere else in the charging management system. This is especially important if you are dealing with a newer vehicle and the charging behavior seems inconsistent or confusing, because sometimes the alternator is being blamed for a control problem it did not create. Now here is the big takeaway. An alternator can absolutely fail, yes, but it is not the only reason a car may have dim lights, battery warning lights, weak accessories, hard starting, or a dead battery. That is why alternator replacement should never be based on symptoms alone. So before replacing an alternator, ask yourself, is the battery itself healthy? Are the terminals clean and tight? Are the ground and charging cables good? Is the serpentine belt driving the alternator properly? Is there a blown fuse or fusible link? Is the connector or regulator circuit damaged? Could a parasitic drain be killing the battery? And on a newer vehicle, is the smart charging system actually working correctly? Those questions matter, because the smarter move is always to confirm the cause before replacing the part. So let's quickly recap. Before replacing an alternator, check for a weak battery, dirty or loose terminals, bad ground or charging cables, a slipping serpentine belt or weak tensioner, a blown fuse or fusible link, connector, wiring, or regulator circuit faults, a parasitic battery drain, and smart charging or battery sensor issues. Sometimes the alternator really is bad. Yes, but do not assume it first, because if the real problem is somewhere else, a new alternator will not fix what the car is actually trying to tell you. And now I want to hear from you. Did you ever think the alternator was bad, but later find out the real problem was something else? Was it the battery, the terminals, the belt, the wiring, or a battery drain? Comment below with what caused it on your car. And if enough people mention the same issue, I will make the next video on how to tell if an alternator is actually bad before replacing it.